What did someone say to you that completely changed your way of thinking? My sister once told me that I had a major role in her developing depression. When I was younger, I absolutely hated her and just hammered on her non-stop with criticism and insults. She was more of a passive person, so I never got the same level of backlash that I had dealt. I was about 5 years younger than her and everyone from the outside would just consider it brother and sister hijinks. I had matured, moved on and forgotten about the torment I used to put her through. It's easy to brush things off when no one is hammering you on it, but when those words escaped her lips, all the vivid memories of what I said and thought came rushing back. It's been 10 plus years now, but I still feel like there isn't much I could ever do to get her sanity back. So, be nice to your siblings, people. You don't always have to get along, but someday they'll be the only ones in your life left, so don't take them for granted and don't treat them like shit. A friend of mine was very into martial arts and had been taking classes for years. One day he was telling me about starting taekwondo all over again from the white belt stage. I asked him why and he said because every teacher teaches differently and learning the same thing with a different method will only make you better. The logic is that in learning something, you'll have a lot of questions that will either go unanswered or that you'll attempt to figure out yourself. Learning it a second time might fill in those gaps. For some reason that reasoning had a profound impact on me. Since then, when people explain things to me that I already know, I listen because I'll lose nothing if they tell me nothing new, but I'll miss out if I could have learned something. Edit. Okay, so this is now my top rated comment. Shout out to MMA Autist Gene for imparting this life-changing wisdom on all of us. Mine actually happened on Reddit. Believe it or not. My father passed away about a year and a half ago and it was a struggle for me at first, but eventually I started to cope. He died at 50 and I was only 23. It was a rough go for a while. A while back I was reading another AskReddit thread about something similar to this and somebody posted a comment along the lines of, when I asked my boss how he could be so calm about a stressful situation, he told me that someday some you love will die and this stuff just won't be as big a deal. It seriously changed my thinking. Because it's true. I feel this way every day. I'm always calm and stress free and it's because that is my mindset. After losing my dad, things just got put into perspective. Edit. Holy crap, this got a lot of upvotes. Thank you to all that did and took the time to read my story. I have lurked on Reddit for a while and this is the first time I have posted something really personal. The outpouring of love and stories like mine is both heartwarming and wrenching. Stay strong, people. If you were a person who loved you very much and wanted to take care of you, nurture you, what would that look like? A bit of a variation on this that my mother has taught, and continues to try to teach, me to always consider when undergoing a difficult time is, would you ever treat your closest friends the way you treat yourself? Would you ever think, yes, the words they're using against themselves and the actions they're continuing to take are what I want to see them doing because that will surely relieve their suffering this time. Double quote. Not huge or anything, but I read a quote somewhere that was like, take the stairs. Enjoy it while you can. You're going to miss them when you're not physically able to take them anymore. Double quote. Now the only time I take an elevator or escalator is when I'm with other people. Forgiveness can't change the past, but it can change the future. Double quote. My mom told me she got the message in a fortune cookie. It really resonated with her because my dad was about to come home from prison and instead of her resenting him and making everyone miserable, she decided to change her attitude and change their future. It ultimately saved their marriage. She told me this when I was going through a really difficult time with my so. I haven't exactly mastered the art of forgiveness, but I'll never forget how powerful it can be. My dad had been diagnosed with lung cancer in May. In June, he told me no matter what happens, I have lived a good life. In July, just before my 20th birthday, he lost his battle. My dad came from nothing. His mom passed away when he was 3 and his dad was not around. He lived on the street and would sleep on playgrounds. He worked his way up to an executive spot in a small company over 30 years. To hear him say that he lived a good life brought me to peace with the situation, and I am now thankful for every day. As I was walking home with my sister, we were walking through a relatively expensive part of town with many fancy homes, and I remarked what I'd give to live in a place like that. She replied it would be awesome, but I'm sure some people look at our home and say the same thing. Really made me appreciate the things I have. I was addicted to heroin at the time. My favorite uncle was in hospice with cancer. I felt so guilty because I took some of his painkillers months before. I went to see him the day before he died and he could barely talk, but when he saw me the first words he said was "I love you so much." He kept saying it and he was clearly using all his energy to say it. I broke down when he said, and it really helped me get my life on track. Edit. Wow guys. This has blown up and the kind words have really touched my heart. I've been clean for 5 months now from drugs, 10 months from heroin, and it's easy to forget. But these nice words have been helpful. I would also like to add, without my uncle dying I would have never met my wife. To any addicts that need someone to talk to, please message me. I'm not NA sponsor, but I've made about every mistake you can and survived, and I'm only 23. I accidentally saw my father's W-2 when we were in his home office while he was helping me out with something. I asked him if he ever resented me and all of my siblings, because if he didn't have to pay to raise all of us, he and my mother could have been balling, doing pretty much anything and everything they wanted. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Not even for a second. If it wasn't for you guys and wanting to give you all a good life, I never would have been motivated to work as hard as I did." Double quote. This was almost 25 years ago and I still remember it clear as day. Even though I didn't have kids at the time, I instantly had a new understanding into what being a good parent involves. During an extreme depression after my ex-fiancée left me, my birthday was shortly after, my mom sent me a birthday card that said, "You may not be the winning horse right now, but you're the only one I'll ever bet on." Double quote. My brother. The test of man is not how far he will go to win, but how far he will go when he has already lost. Therapist said to me, "If I could show you a picture of what it will look like when you get there, you'd have no concerns about trying. But I can't. So you'll just have to trust me. It's going to be worth it." Double quote. That sentence conveys hope so well. Thank you very much for sharing. I hope your therapist knows her words still help others. So long as you, and everyone who this statement touches, I guess, still can remember to share it. My brother and I used to argue all the time as kids. I don't remember what we were arguing about. But at one point he was talking about how I get mad at him and he said, "You're nice to everyone all the time, but I'll let you yell at me cause the anger has to go somewhere." Stopped me dead in my tracks. We're super close now. And never argue. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. I'm older than my little brother by 5 years and my little sister by 5. When I was about 14 or so, arguing with my dad in private about something I don't remember. He, being the second oldest of 8 kids, told me, "Any decision you make in this household, you make 3 times. Once when you make it, once when your brother makes the same decision after watching you do it, and once when your sister makes the same decision after watching you and your brother do it. How you treat your brother will tell him how he can treat your sister. And how you treat your sister tells her how she will expect to be treated for the rest of her life. Even as far as her future boyfriends." That kinda shook me up and made me rethink my role as the oldest child. I started taking my responsibilities as the role model a lot more seriously after that. Even when you aren't trying to actively influence those around you, those who look up to and respect you will still base their decisions, in part, on how they've seen you handle similar situations. If you break down and get stressed and angry when something inconvenient happens, they'll feel better doing the same when something similarly small happens to them. But if you keep your cool in a dire situation and under a lot of stress, it can inspire them to believe they can do the same. When my parents were going through a nasty divorce, my mom took off to Ecuador to kayak and party it up. My dad was left as a single father and sole provider for my 2 little brothers. I was supposed to leave for my first semester of college but realized I would have to stay home and go to a community college to help my family during the rough time. I was so pissed at my mom. She was supposed to be working and helping pay for my college due to the arrangement she made with my father when he put her through school. Instead she was making dumb decisions and not taking care of the kids she brought into this world. I was really bitter that I had to put my dreams on hold and play house. One day I was driving my youngest brother home from school after a long day of classes at the community college I despised. He was 9 at the time. The ride was pretty quiet other than the normal "How was your day" chit chat. As we pulled onto our street, I realized he had tears in his eyes. I asked him what was up and he told me, "I don't really feel like I have a mom anymore, so thanks for being here." From that point on I made it a point to not be a mom, but be a better sister. I used that time to get to know him and gain his trust. I always want him to know that I'm in his corner. This helped my relationship with all 4 of my brothers. Close bracket. A friend of mine lost their 5-year-old son to a car accident and during the next few weeks he was in terrible shape, constantly crying and unable to function. Another friend of mine told him, "Listen, none of us can understand the pain you are in. But consider your son for a minute. Do you think he will be happy knowing that he came into your lives for only 5 years? And when he's gone, all he left behind was sadness? This beautiful kid came into your lives and gave you 5 amazing years with beautiful memories to hang on to. Nobody is telling you not to be sad. That's impossible. But don't forget the good times. And hang on to those good times. Laugh. Be happy as well as sad. There is nothing wrong with that." This really changed the way I think about death and the passing of loved ones. You can't have what I have without putting in the work I did to get it. Double quote. I had been a bicycle messenger for around 7 or 8 years. No real life plan other than partying. But I was starting to get a bit bored with being a courier. So one day I jokingly asked a business guy in an elevator how I get a job like his. He said, "You can't have what I have without putting in the work I did to get it," in an annoyed and condescending way. But it just floored me. It totally changed my worldview. I went out and got my GED. Quit my job as a bicycle messenger. Started at community college. And now I am at a university and am 1 semester away from having a BS in computer science. It was actually a Reddit thread. "Men of Reddit, what do you wish women knew?" Double quote. The top comment was about how men also like to get compliments and they feel undervalued all the time because no one says nice things to them. Then there were hundreds of responses saying the same thing. It made me realize that society teaches us that women are fragile and need compliments all the time, while men are strong and you can make fun of them and never have to compliment them. It made me realize that this idea is so dehumanizing and how while I am so aware of sexism against women I never thought of how it affects men. I try to give the men in my life more compliments now. It wasn't necessarily a particular thing he said. But when one of my friends came crying to me about how much he hated himself for being gay, it completely changed my view on homosexuality. I had been raised in a very conservative religious setting and had believed up until that point that being gay was a choice and byproduct of a deeper mental disorder. It took me a long time to admit to myself that I no longer saw homosexuality as a bad thing, especially given how demonized it was by my friends and family. I'd say it was one of the first opinions I formed that was in stark opposition to the Christian vacuum I was living in. Usually my strong opinions were just echoes of my parents' church leaders. When working as a nurse in the mental health field I always felt that everything had to go right for it to be a good day. Everyone had to be happy. No one should be injured, etc. I used to beat myself up if it was any less than perfect. My supervisor once said a good day in this field is one where you finish the shift and everyone is still alive. At that moment, I realized my shift didn't have to be perfect, but I was helping people by just keeping them alive. I will say I did not give the LGBT community the respect they deserve. I do not disrespect them. I would think things to myself, but out of kindness not speak my opinion. My best friend recently came out to me and it opened my eyes. He is no different than anyone else. He's the same guy he was before. Who he is attracted to does not make up his personality. My eyes are opened and I no longer silently judge others. I have much more understanding and feel like this lesson was long overdue for me. A few off the top of my head. A friend of mine once convinced me that I'm not obligated to like my family, and that I can create my own tribe of friends I truly wanted to spend time with. This was poignant at the time because home life was toxic and really taking a toll on my mental state. Same guy also said teach people how to treat you. Very simple concept but again resonant because around that time I was also grappling with some confidence issues and would often let people take advantage of me. Another one that I think about from time to time happened while I was on a date with a girl I met online. She was explaining what she did for work and admitted that she was having serious issues with contributing to group meetings because she felt anxious and overwhelmed. She was debating whether or not it was worth the stress. And she had even started searching for different job opportunities. I said something stupid along the lines of really? No. You'll be just fine. Just get up there and do it. She looked at me and said, "You're saying that for you." In the moment, I remember feeling a little miffed by that response because, after all, I was only trying to offer some supportive words. But later I really thought about why she said that. I didn't really know her at all and I was essentially trivializing her problem. Then I realized, shit, I absolutely hate when people say things like that to me when I try to talk to them about my anxiety depression. And it's responses like the one I gave her that make me reluctant to even open up about it in the first place. It is only self-serving and does nothing to actually help the other person. I was a selfish egocentric BTCH back then. Even if I had a brother and a sister, I wanted all to myself. I used to like very much cheese. Any type of cheese. One day I went to visit my aunt in Italy and we crossed the border in France. She bought like 20 types of different cheese and when we returned home, she opened all of those 20 packages and made me taste from each one of it. I asked why was she doing that? Because it's a cheese. And her answer was, what is more beautiful than sharing what you like with the people you love? Double quote. Me and my friend were talking about the butterfly effect and how every tiny detail affects the world so much. Like if I were to somehow go back in time, a long time, and walk past a meaningless peasant and say hello and have a small meaningless conversation, then come back and all of a sudden so much would have changed. That peasant could have been on the way to meet his future wife who he would have had children with, but since I stopped and had a chat he missed his opportunity to meet her, so therefore they never have children and those children never have children and their great 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 grandchildren never existed. It's just crazy to think that every little thing we do is for a reason and affect the world so much. Maybe my great great grandchild will solve world poverty or be the next president, but if I had never existed that would never have happened. Or that old peasant could have been an ancestor of someone really important. That peasant thought his existence was useless, but without him we wouldn't have had that really important person who changed the world. A mirror doesn't work without light. Double quote. A year before I was set to graduate teachers college, I was going through a really rough phase. Both of my sisters had died in a car crash with a drunk driver, and it really threw me into a spiral. I left my job. I broke up with the girl I had been seeing. My grades plummeted from near perfect scores to barely scraping passing marks. It was the lowest I have ever been in my life. I questioned whether I still wanted to be a teacher. How the FCK could a loser like me be trusted with these fragile minds? When I couldn't even stop from throwing my own life away. I was less than a semester away from graduation. But I made the choice to speak with a counselor about dropping out. Obviously, the counselor tried to talk me out of it, eventually getting me to downgrade to a leave of absence, but just before I left he told me that quote and it's stuck with me ever since. I don't think a day has gone by where that simple little phrase hasn't put things into perspective. Sociology 101 in college. Doing unit on abusive relationships. I, really outgoing, extroverted, opinionated, said the obvious, why don't women in abusive relationships just leave, etc. My teacher says, Did you ever consider that maybe you don't relate to women in these situations because abusers make sure they don't go for girls like you? It seriously opened my eyes and made me want to work with victims of domestic violence. I had never considered that not everyone in the world grew up with parents and teachers and coaches building up their self-esteem from the beginning of their life. And when I think about it, I feel like an ignorant jackass. Close bracket. One day in primary school, when we were being taught about WWII, my history teacher was teaching about the Holocaust and suddenly looked at us straight and said Hitler was a fiery orator. Probably one of the very best. If you listened to his speeches, he would convince you to join his cause. My young mind was blown that day. It shocked me that someone was saying something great about Hitler. Till then, for the young me, I always associated good people with good things and bad people with bad things. Ever since that day, when I encounter someone with bad morals or ethics, I find some aspect of their character that could probably make me better than I am that day. Interestingly, it's something I wrote down for myself in desperation and had forgotten about, having wasted years of my life and allowing my fear to rule me. I wrote this down as a note on my phone and then promptly forgot about it. I don't know how to tell you this. This is your life. Double quote. Came across it about a month later, and while I'm not instantly transformed, baby steps are being taken to help me not throw away my entire life. The fear is still there, and I haven't moved forward with what I think is most important for me right now. But I think about this every day. There is no second chance. I either start working towards what I want now, or I wake up in 10 years exactly where I am now. My life used to be this abstract idea. This future where I would be someone, be doing something, having an impact on my world. But I just turned 30 and I'm paralyzed by fear. Haven't done anything. Haven't gotten anywhere. Continuing down this road is a recipe for the waste of my entire lifetime. Dude. That's Guan Fking Yu. His nickname is the God of War. They actually worship him as a deity today. He is worshipped as an indigenous Chinese deity, a bodhisattva in Buddhist tradition, and as a guardian deity in Taoism and many other religious bodies. His weapon was called the Green Dragon Crescent Blade and had a long, beautiful beard. Cao Cao, Emperor of Wei, admired Guan Yu so much that when Guan Yu left his service to be with his sworn brother and rival, Liu Bei, Cao Cao stopped his men from pursuing him and said, "He's just doing his duty to his lord. There's no need to pursue him." Double quote. In the mid-80s I was halfway through med school and was kind of an immature conservative with immature conservative values. It was mostly from having a somewhat sheltered Catholic upbringing and not really having seen the world. Anyway. One of my classmates was a married female who had kept her maiden name. This was still a relatively uncommon thing back then. So I asked her why she hadn't taken her husband's last name. I then expected myself to be in the midst of a feminist conversation about gender roles and blah blah blah. Instead she said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "I love my father-in-law very much and think he's a great guy. But he's not the one who worked his ass off, struggling with 2 jobs so he could afford to put me through undergrad and med school. I want it so every time my dad drives by my office, he'll see his name on the shingle out front, since he's the guy who is responsible for my being here." Double quote. Never before had such a simple statement so utterly flipped my opinion on an issue 180 degrees so quickly. In fact, I can't even tell this story to people verbally now, 35 years later, without tears welling up in my eyes. And I often try to think about this story as an example of how much our opinions are shaped by one's perspective. So I really try to look at things from the other person's point of view before dismissing their opinions.